Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacob Bolin. I'm a program manager with Plugin NC. First off, I'd really like to thank everyone for joining this afternoon's webinar. That's a co-production from Plugin NC and the Clean Vehicles Coalitions, Clean Cities Coalitions of North Carolina, of which there are three: Land of Sky, Clean Cities Coalition, who we'll hear from today; Centralina, Clean Fuels Coalition, located in the Charlotte area; and Triangle J, Clean Cities Coalition, which is going to be located, of course, here in the Triangle. So just want to say, again, thanks for everyone joining today. Really looking forward to all of the content that we have slated. We've really got a pretty full lineup for today. We're going to do our best to get through it as quickly as possible, but also to certainly cover a very wide foundation for everyone. So obviously today we're going to be focusing on purchasing and policy considerations of electric vehicles for organizations, fleets, and municipalities. This is going to be the second webinar of our three-part webinar series focusing on medium and heavy-duty vehicle electrification in the region of kind of the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic, and also, of course, specifically here in North Carolina. So we'll hear kind of from a variety of topics today, some of which are going to be applicable on the light-duty side, but certainly keeping in mind that we've kind of got our eyes set on what the potential and kind of the expansion will look like here in North Carolina as we move and kind of expand into the medium and heavy-duty market sectors for electrification. So with that, let's go ahead and just get started here. I'd like to first share, for any that might not be familiar, our Plugin NC program. So Plugin NC was founded in 2011 as an outreach and education program to advance electric transportation, of course, here in North Carolina. So really that's around engaging with individual drivers, community members, maybe who are interested in driving electric but have a lot of questions or maybe some concerns and want to learn more, and also trying to build out infrastructure and engagement with workplaces, businesses, and organizations such as yourself. So thank you all for joining today, and certainly feel free to check out Plugin NC on our various social media channels and website if you're not familiar with us. Really quickly, I'd just kind of like to share with Plugin NC kind of like the steering body that comes together to craft the content that we then kind of share with North Carolinians. So you'll see here a really wide array of public and private companies and organizations that are working together with this shared interest and vision of expanding electrification of transportation across the state. And so it's a really great opportunity as we think about how to work with all the utilities in the state of North Carolina, many of the private charging manufacturers and vendors, whether it's from a hardware or software perspective, as we think about many of the state agencies and government bodies from NCDOT and DEQ, the Clean Energy Technology Center, and then also impassioned drivers club like the Blue Ridge EV Club, among others. You know, we've got the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy worked in, that's a very active member, and as I'd mentioned before, certainly our Clean Cities partners as well. So before we get into things today, I just thought it would be fun to kind of poll the audience with our first question. So currently it's kind of a big time here in North Carolina with recent announcements that were made for some Volkswagen mitigation funding. And we'll hear some more details about that today, but I just wanted to see for our audience members who did or did not apply for the first round of applications with the VW funds. So we'll give it just a few minutes here, a few seconds really, to get those answers submitted. All right, great. Yeah, so it looks like for the most part, many folks maybe joining today weren't applicable, but that's okay as we think about what it takes to engage with those organizations and entities that, of course, were applicable and kind of continue pushing that forward. Also thinking about the number that did actually submit those applications, and we were certainly happy to see those awardees announced and mentioned, and for those that didn't, we'll be looking forward to engaging with your organizations to assist with maybe your interest in applying in the future, or for other potential class types, or maybe the DC fast charging application wasn't relevant, but maybe the level 2 application is. So we'll learn more about that today. For a second poll question, I'm just really curious what funding areas, or really what electrification segments you're most interested in. So as I mentioned, we've got the DC fast charging in level 2, and then we've also got the designation of electric transit and school buses versus that of electric medium and heavy duty vehicles, really kind of trying to parse those out a little bit for the sakes of this conversation. All right, seems like we've got a pretty nice spread here, especially as we think about the DC fast charging infrastructure. Again, some really good kind of progress there with the recent awardees announced. And then, of course, the electric transit, school buses, and other medium to heavy duty vehicle types. Really nice to see the kind of the interest and the engagement from the other medium and heavy duty vehicles, aside from the electric buses. We certainly had a chance to focus on transit and school buses in our last webinar, and now we'll have the opportunity to highlight Lion Electric and others as they share some of their vehicle types, and we'll learn more from them today. I would also like to take this moment to mention that for our third webinar of the series, which should be offered at the end of September or early October, we'll be focusing on utility engagement for these different projects for electrifying this vehicle sector. So just keep that in mind as we kind of wrap up this series. We do really want to make sure that we have those utility considerations worked in here as well. So before I move any further, just really want to quickly kind of set the stage for where we are currently with the electrification kind of approach from the statewide perspective when it comes to purchasing and policy considerations. Most specifically, the recent announcements for DC fast charging infrastructure, which we see on this slide, where we really are going to have a much more expansive build out, especially as many of you will see along certain travel corridors across the state. This is a really exciting development as we think about filling many of the gaps that maybe existed in the state previously or up to right now, that these infrastructure projects will be able to fill. So we're certainly excited to see those get online and get moving over the next many months. Same goes for the electric transportation options for the medium and heavy duty vehicle classes. As you can see, we've got a pretty nice announcement for electric school and transit buses. You know, we are still working to expand the availability and the options and the viability for other medium and heavy duty vehicle types, which again is a real focus of ours today. Certainly excited to hear about what's to come and what's underway in other parts of the country as well. So with that, we'll hear from 3 different speakers today. First, it's going to be Bill Eaker from Land of Sky Regional Council, which is the Clean Vehicles Coalition located in Asheville. He'll be telling us about some specific funding opportunities, both the VW settlement and quite a few other kind of options or funding mechanisms that are in the work as well. We'll hear from Mark McGrew, who's the Senior Sales Manager at Lion Electric. They are manufacturers of school buses, but also many other medium and heavy duty vehicle types, certainly electric options there. So he's going to share a little bit about some pilot programs that they have underway and also some recent developments in the area of purchasing and policy considerations as it relates to North Carolina and also the manufacturer's kind of point of view there. And lastly, we'll hear from Chris Davis, who's bringing in kind of a fleet manager's perspective from the City of Charlotte's Department of Transportation. Chris will be sharing quite a bit about their kind of current electrification strategies with the city, what's going on kind of in terms of the policy side from their Bloomberg Award and others, kind of looking at it from a more local perspective, and then also sharing some of the considerations for what they're going to be working and striving towards as they look to kind of engage and bring on more medium and heavy-duty electric vehicles as well. So with that, I'll just go ahead and hand it over to Bill Eaker to share a little bit about the Clean Cities Coalitions of North Carolina and to run through all those different funding mechanisms that we currently have in the state.
Jacob, can you hear me?
Sure can. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, great. I actually lost my connection just a second ago as a participant, so Jacob, I'm going to have to ask you to change the slides for me because I wouldn't have time to log back in as a participant. If you can do that for me?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm up currently, Bill, on the What is Clean Cities slide.
Right. Okay. First of all, thanks, Jacob. I want to thank you, Advanced Energy, Plug-in NC, and the other Clean Cities Coalitions here in North Carolina for partnering with us to present today's webinar. As Jacob said, I'm Bill Eaker with the Land to Sky Regional Council of Governments in Asheville, and I serve as the coordinator of the Land to Sky Clean Vehicles Coalition, which serves the greater Asheville area. During my presentation, I'm going to provide a quick overview of the Clean Cities program and then discuss some funding opportunities with a focus on North Carolina. So I won't have time to discuss all the information in my slides today, but the slides will be sent to you after the webinar for your review. And if you have any questions about any of the detail, please give me a call. I'd be happy to answer any questions. So Clean Cities is a 27-year-old program of the U.S. Department of Energy, and it's an outgrowth of the Federal Energy Policy Act of 1992. Its primary goal is to reduce the use of petroleum in the transportation sector for greater energy and economic security, and also these programs help reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well. And all of this is achieved through the work of the Department of Energy staff, the technical resources of the National Energy Labs across the country, and a network of nearly 100 local Clean Cities coalitions and thousands of their public and private sector stakeholders. And as you can see on the map, some coalitions serve major metropolitan areas and others cover an entire state. And many of the coalitions around North Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, et cetera, cover an entire state. So to date, the program has helped to deploy over 1 million alternative fuel vehicles and to displace billions of gallons of petroleum. Next slide. Okay, thank you. As Jacob mentioned earlier, there are 3 Department of Energy designated Clean Cities coalitions here in North Carolina, including the Triangle Clean Cities Coalition that serves the Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill region, Central Lina Clean Fuels Coalition that serves the greater Charlotte region, and the Land to Sky Clean Vehicles Coalition that serves the greater Asheville region. Next slide, please. So coalitions focus on both on and off-road light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles. And we promote the use of alternative and renewable fuels, including biofuels, natural gas, propane autogas, hydrogen, and electricity. And we assist our stakeholders with deploying fueling and charging infrastructure. Some years ago, the DOE expanded the portfolio of the program to include idle reduction, VMT reduction, and fuel economy improvements. And if you haven't seen it, Oak Ridge National Laboratory produces a wonderful website, very helpful tool. It's at fueleconomy.com, which is great for comparing vehicles side by side. I encourage you to take a look at that. Again, fueleconomy.gov. And more recently, the DOE began researching the benefits and the impacts of new mobility choices and emerging technologies, such as autonomous and connected vehicles. Next slide. So as far as our services go, we do a lot of education and outreach work, including workshops, webinars, tabling and community events, ride and drives, and we also set up trainings for first responders and vehicle technicians, and we're in the process of doing that right now here in North Carolina. Our coalition stakeholder meetings serve as a forum for discussions and networking. We can assist fleet managers and others in examining their fleets and how alternative and advanced technology vehicles may be of benefit to them, and help them implement their clean transportation program. We are also very aware of the various grant programs and incentives and which of them might be a good fit for the stakeholders' projects. For example, here in Western North Carolina, we've assisted our stakeholders in securing over $15 million in grants, including the most recent Volkswagen settlement awards. And we also recognize our stakeholders for their good work. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to give a brief overview of the several different funding opportunities in North Carolina and beyond. Some of these type grants are also available in other states, but states have different eligibility requirements and criteria and may differ on the type projects that they fund. So it's best for you to check with your local Clean Cities Coalition or state program administrators on specific programs in each state. The VW settlement funding provides a great opportunity for North Carolina. North Carolina is receiving $92 million through the settlement, and I think that's in the top 10 of the 50 states. The governor selected the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality as the administrator of the program, also known as the beneficiary. And the DEQ plans to distribute the funds in 3 different phases. But as I'll mention later, this is subject to change. The VW funds can be used to repower or replace older class 4 to 8 diesel vehicles with either new clean diesel, propane, CNG, hybrid, electric, battery electric, or hydrogen vehicles. And plug-in electric vehicle projects can include include funding for charging infrastructure. So only electric vehicles come along with funding for charging. The other alt fuels, there is no funding for infrastructure. So the older diesel vehicles that you're replacing must be scrapped, and there's certain criteria you can see there for that. Under the VW settlement, there is no funding to replace light-duty vehicles or gasoline-powered vehicles. There are funds to repower or replace medium and heavy-duty transit, shuttle, and school buses, and also medium and heavy-duty local freight trucks, which I'll define a little bit in more depth later. Under the VW settlement, states can allocate up to 15% of their environmental mitigation trust funds to zero-emission vehicle infrastructure, and fortunately, North Carolina DEQ has decided to do that thus far. As I mentioned earlier, 2 of the Phase 1 RFPs have been released and awarded. And those were the RFPs for the diesel bus and vehicle program and the RFP for the DC fast charging program. And the last RFP to be released under Phase 1 is for the Level 2 charging stations, and that will be released soon. Next slide, please. So this table shows the state's Phase 1 plan and how it planned to allocate the first $30 million among the different eligible action categories. You can see that 40% was allocated for school bus replacement projects, 20% for transit bus projects, 10% for the repower or replacement of medium and heavy-duty local freight trucks, and 10% for various off-road vehicles and equipment, and 15% for zero-emission vehicle infrastructure program, which includes charging stations. And the recent awards that were announced about a month ago have pretty much followed this allocation plan. Next slide, please. So as far as the timeline goes for the first 2 RFPs, the state released the 2 RFPs last July, and the applications were due on September 30th, giving applicants 90 days to apply. Then the state reviewed and scored the applications and made their selections. There was a delay in making the award announcements until the state legislature had appropriated the VW funds. The grant awards were announced on July 29th, and the state is currently saying that it will take about 2 to 6 months to process the contracts and get those in place. There were funds allocated for both urban, suburban areas and rural areas. So those of you in rural areas, you won't be competing with the Charlottes and Raleighs in the state. There will be allocation for projects in rural areas, and you'll have a good chance of succeeding. Under the diesel vehicle RFP, both repowers and replacements were eligible. And the definition for local freight trucks included dump trucks, delivery trucks, and refuse trucks. And those travel up to 200-mile radius from their home base. You could also receive up to 100% of the cost of repowering or replacing government-owned vehicles. And nonprofit entities could apply for 25 to 75% of the cost, with the upper limit of 75% for electric vehicles. Private sector entities were not eligible to apply for the diesel vehicle projects, but public-private partnerships were eligible. Under the DC Fast Charge RFP, both public and private sector entities were eligible. Chargers placed on government-owned properties could apply for up to 100% of the cost of both equipment and installation, and non-government entities could apply for up to 80%. The state prioritized the funding of fast chargers along priority highway corridors to fill gaps in our existing, or between stations, I should say. And the fast chargers also had to be public access, have both type connectors, and be network stations. Next slide, please. So what's next? The state expects to release the Phase 1 Level 2 RFP by the end of December. There will be about $1.1 million available. For Level 2, both public, nonprofit, and private sector entities will be eligible. And the L2 stations can be public access or located at workplaces or at multi-unit dwellings. They're going to be have to be network stations. And this is going to be a simpler process. This will be a rebate program with no contracts involved. I understand there will be a set amount awarded per charging cord, depending on the type of applicant or the location of the charger. And it's going to be administered on a first-come, first-served basis. So we're recommending that you get ready now for that and select and assess your charging sites and start getting quotes from your vendors. The planning process for Phase 2 will most likely occur in early 2021. And the stakeholders will have an opportunity to provide some input during that process. The state may combine Phases 2 and 3 into one phase, which means there would be about $61 million available. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to run through the last few minutes that I've got here, some additional funding opportunities here in North Carolina and beyond. So there's the Diesel Emission Reduction Act. This is a federal program administered by EPA. And EPA does issue RFPs during the year to apply for the federal funding through EPA. But there's also a portion of the funds that are allocated to the state. And so the states will issue separate RFPs for their programs. And again, Department of Environmental Quality is administering this particular program. Under DERA, both public and private sector entities are eligible. And if you want to replace diesel vehicles, for on-road vehicles, they need to be class 5 to 8 if you're replacing those with electric drive. And the amount of the funding that's provided will really vary. For example, if you're replacing a vehicle with a zero-emission vehicle, you can get up to 45% federal share. So it's quite a bit less than under the VW program. And currently, the state has a funding cycle open. There's about $600,000 available, and that will be closing at the end of September. So I highly recommend that you contact the state officials regarding getting in on that. There's another federal program called CMAQ, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, that can fund alternative fuel vehicle and infrastructure projects and provide up to 80% federal share. And here in North Carolina, if you're interested in CMAQ funding, contact the North Carolina Department of Transportation, specifically Heather Hildebrandt. A large portion of those funds are allocated out to the metropolitan planning organizations and rural planning organizations. You would apply through those organizations. Here in North Carolina, NC State University has applied for CMAQ funding from DOT and set up their own sub-grant program, which we call CFAT. And under CFAT, it's got to follow all the CMAQ program criteria, including Buy America requirements, NEPA requirements, et cetera. But under CFAT, public, private, and nonprofit entities are all eligible. And under the last cycle of CFAT, they were offering funds to cover the incremental cost of converting vehicles or to provide a term lease for new electric vehicles. But the funding for vehicles is only available in the 24 non-attainment area counties in North Carolina, which are, those are primarily in the Charlotte, Raleigh-Durham, and Triad areas of our state. So if you're in those counties, you'd be eligible for the vehicle funding. However, an amendment to the transportation bill several years ago now allows funding for electric vehicle charging stations anywhere in a state. So funds are available through the CMAQ or CFAT program for that. But under CFAT, in the last cycle, they're only funding charging stations where you can put in a new station like in a parking deck where there's no ground disturbance. And the next cycle will probably be coming up in the spring. And I'm not sure at this point what the eligibility and criteria will be for that. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to mention these real fast and then move on. There's a Federal Transit Administration low and no emission grant program known as LOMO. And those of you in the transportation transit business are eligible for these grants. It can fund public transit, shuttle buses, and also maintenance facilities and training. And for the last few years, the majority of these funds have been awarded to battery electric transit buses and infrastructure. And you can see there are several entities in North Carolina have received these funds. And last, Duke Energy has proposed a North Carolina Electric Transportation Pilot Program, a $76 million program, before the North Carolina Utilities Commission. They're currently awaiting approval for that. And you can see there on the slide what funding opportunities there may be for charging stations and various buses. Next slide, please. So this is just some funding contacts, websites for some of these programs. And down at the bottom, I've got the contacts for the Clean Cities Coalitions here in North Carolina. And I strongly recommend that you contact your local Clean Cities Coalition for assistance to explore these funding opportunities. So we'll take some questions later. Next slide. And we'll pass it over to Mark McGrew with Lion Electric. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate great stuff. So welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name is Mark McGrew with Lion Electric. I'm the Senior Sales Manager, and I'm going to be giving you a quick introduction to Lion Electric, but more importantly, talk about some of the purchasing and policy considerations that you should be taking into account and what we've learned deploying electric vehicles over the course of the last 4.5 years. So who is Lion? Lion is an OEM that today is only building all-electric product lines. As you saw on the first slide briefly, ranging from medium and heavy-duty trucks, which will be discussed today, to shuttle and school buses. The vast majority of our experience to date has been in the school bus industry, and we are just getting underway with production on our trucks, which I'll discuss momentarily. So today, we have over 300 employees. That's actually doubled in the last year since I've joined. 2,000 indirect jobs through the suppliers that we work with throughout North America. We're capable of building up to 3,000 electric vehicles per year at our facility that's based out of St. Jerome, which is just north of Montreal. And today, we already have over 4 million zero-emission miles on the road between the U.S. and Canada. We have a variety of experience centers throughout the country that we've already started to set up, ranging from Washington to California, New York. Our next 2 experience centers will be coming in Arizona and Florida. What those are, that is a location where we set up brick and mortar for on-the-ground service, training, as well as parts distribution to ensure that the rollout of any of our product lines can be met with having folks nearby to where the vehicles are being deployed to ensure that there's comfort in the fact that you're taking on a new vehicle in a new industry, and Lion will be there to help service. Throughout the course of the next 24 to 36 months, we're going to continue to set up brick and mortar throughout the U.S. Where we have our largest deployments of products. As far as deployments go, I wanted to specifically talk about truck deployments that we have upcoming. The map that you see on the right is where our vehicles today are located. Again, everything we've done thus far up until today has been in the school bus world. We're taking all of that great knowledge and advancements that we've made with our electric powertrain, bringing it to truck, and we're actually in production as we speak on a backlog of vehicles that we've sold over the last 15 months. One of the big pilot deployments I wanted to talk about today hasn't been announced yet, but keep your eyes peeled probably within the next few weeks. We have secured an order for 2,500 units. These are Class 6 last mile delivery trucks, the first of which will be coming off the line here in just a few weeks on September 8th. So we're very excited about that. That map will continue to expand as none of our truck deployments are listed there yet, but we already know that we're going to have vehicles heading to Washington, Arizona, Florida, New Jersey, and others. So lots of exciting stuff coming down the pipeline, and really great news on this initial large volume order. We also secured our first pilot with Waste Connections, who's the 3rd largest private refuse hauler in North America. They purchased their first vehicles to begin testing in Vancouver, Washington, as well as Miami, Florida. Those refuse trucks will hit the road in December of this year. Also not listed, but just recently happened. We just secured an order for 50 vehicles with a large logistics supplier based out of Canada. Other ones that are out there, but I think these are the ones the most relevant for the audience to understand that electric is not just coming, it's here, and OEMs like Lion are ready to take on the challenge and help, whether it be on the government side or the private side, be able to meet the needs of what you're looking for to make that transformation. So getting into more of what we wanted to discuss today, we have a lot of experience with deploying electric vehicles, and I'd like to talk a little bit about what our recommendations are that you should be considering if you are a private or government fleet looking to make the change. The first item that must be taken into consideration is determining if electric fits your needs and where, meaning making sure that you are taking a look at your fleet list of inventory and determining where is the lowest hanging fruit, whether that be in terms of high maintenance costs, number of miles that it's run. All of these things have to take into consideration, and I'll get a little bit more into depth on all 5 of these items on the upcoming slide. The next one is total cost of ownership, or as we like to mention, return on incremental value, something that you have to look at, because while we all want this to be an ecological conversation, it still has to be an economical one. It's got to make sense. The third item is discovering all possibilities when it comes to financing or grants. Bill did a great job talking about the variety of grants available in North Carolina, and there are a lot of great opportunities around battery electric vehicles. A lot of the funding tends to be a higher percentage for the replacement electric. You have to take advantage of that, and I'll get into some more information on that. The fourth one, and maybe at the end of the day the most important one, get the right infrastructure evaluation. You have to start early when it comes to infrastructure. There are some complexities to it. We don't expect you all to be the experts, but it's something that you really have to look for. We've learned the hard way in some cases early on in our school bus world that it can really set a project up for failure if you don't start early and do things the right way. And last, but certainly not least, is going to be making sure that your drivers and your technicians have the right training. Sounds fundamental, but there's a lot that goes into it to make sure that these vehicles are safe, your drivers are safe, making sure that when vehicles come in, I think Bill mentioned, the first responders within the communities are trained, all things that you have to take into consideration. So let's dig into each one of these. So ensuring electric fits your needs. What I mean by that is determining the types of vehicles that you're running today and what can and cannot be electrified. Lion has a variety of product offerings that are available today, but let's be honest, we're not going to be able to meet your needs across the board. In fact, typically what we tell folks that we're speaking to is we can usually meet the needs of about 40 to 60% of the medium and heavy duty trucks that you have in your fleet today. The rest are either coming down the road, maybe somebody else offers them, or maybe they're a few years away. But at the end of the day, you really got to start there and figure out what do you have, what can I convert. The Class 6 for us is one of the staples. This is the truck that we received a large volume order on. I don't want you to look at what's on the back of this now, which is a dry box. Think about it from this standpoint. We are manufacturing the cab, the chassis, and we're electrifying that. What goes on the back, we're agnostic to. This particular product could be in the form of a dry box, refrigerated box, an aerial truck, platform truck, stake bed truck, etc. 26,000 GVWR up to 180 miles in range. And with all of our vehicles, we take a modular battery approach, meaning that we have a variety of offerings based on your duty cycle, because every vocation is likely to be different. The Class 8 is similar, just higher in GVWR, and there's a lot more flexibility with what we can build on that one, and I'll show you on the next slide. We can go up to 60,000 GVWR, up to 336 kilowatts. So we're really starting to put on some serious battery packs and kilowatts with these vehicles in order to get the miles and range that our customers have been asking for. That particular truck is out to 170 miles. From a vocational standpoint, I also wanted to show some of the other ones. And again, these are all trucks that are available today or by the end of the year. The refuse has, hands down, I think, gained the most amount of traction in the shortest amount of time within this industry. The refuse truck, there's been a lot of great publicity recently from our partnership with Waste Connections to other announcements that have been made. It's very simple. Refuse trucks have typically a short-range duty cycle with high intensity for start-stop, and they make perfect sense when it comes to the electric vehicle. One unique thing about our offering that I'll mention that no one else in the industry has today is we have chosen to go with an electric packer. As most of you will know, the industry is traditionally going to be in a hydraulic body. We've done that for a variety of competitive reasons, as well as advantageous reasons to be able to get the job done, which we could take offline if any of you are interested in that application. The bucket truck, again, could be for the larger utilities. or even government entities that are running tree trimming services or changing out lights, street lights within the towns or communities. This is an integrated solution, so it's not quite the same as a hybrid electric bucket truck, meaning that we are using our high voltage batteries to power the aerial. The utility truck, again, government or private fleet with the utility bodies for tools, and could be in our Lion 6 or Lion 8 application. And last but not least, really exciting to see how far it's come from when I started 10 years ago in the Class 3 market to today, where we have a Class 8 tandem axle tractor that will be coming at the tail end of this year, and then orders right now are moving into Q1. But you'll see below the variety of offerings as far as range and pack. So again, make sure that you understand what's out there, what do you have that fits these needs, and then try to find the partners out there, the OEMs out there that have those offerings today. That's certainly step one. The next thing that I mentioned was understanding the economics of going electric. One of the things that Lion does with every one of our truck customers is we take into account the return on incremental. We've developed a spreadsheet in conjunction with our early adopter end users as well as our team. And ultimately what we want to do is we want numbers to be your numbers. If it's going to make sense, it's got to work economically for you. So we're trying to take into account current energy and maintenance and repair costs versus the benefits of electric. We can calculate and provide you the total annual savings over the life of the truck. The life of an electric vehicle should be out to 12 years. Our batteries and electric motor will be able to make it that long, so then it really comes down to the chassis, which we're manufacturing the chassis to live in the Canadian world. Therefore, it will work in all elements with the U.S. as well. We also want to make sure that you understand the internal rate of return, as well as where does that line cross in terms of months, for how long it will take to go from the diesel to the incremental cost to go electric. These are all very important things that you need to understand, and you want to make sure you're working with partners that are very transparent and open as far as what those numbers will look like so that you can make the best decision for your operation. The next step is to consider all finance, subsidies, grants, and there's a lot of them out there. I'm not going to talk too much because Bill did a wonderful job, but I have those mentioned as well. But I'd add to that utilities also have a lot of funding when it comes to infrastructure. And I think Bill mentioned Duke in there briefly, but I know Duke is one of the very progressive ones in North Carolina. So you got to make sure that you're seeking out and looking for any and all funding today. We as an OEM have a path to where in the next 5 years we believe and we are working towards getting to where we believe will be cost parity or very close to cost parity with diesel. In the meantime, we all need to take advantage of the subsidies that are out there. You also need to consider any financing, rental, or leasing models. I mentioned that there are some OEMs out there that are doing battery leasing today. We actually have a unique partnership with Duke Energy where we are able to do a finance lease financing package for the entire cost of an electric vehicle along with infrastructure. So there's a lot of creative things out there. Work with the OEMs that you're talking with, see what they have available, and there's a lot of ways that you can get into the electric space without necessarily having to utilize capital, which I know at this time is very difficult. And last but not least, partner with OEMs and or work with your Clean City coalitions locally to make sure that you understand how to work through the grant process. And what I've done with each of these slides is our solution. I don't need to go into it, but just quickly, we have developed a grant team. We have 5 dedicated employees that work on finding the grants, writing the grants, assisting with the grants. So try to work with folks that have an understanding of that because we know you may not have the time or resources to do all of the legwork. Another really important item that I'd mentioned that we are starting to work hard on and we're making some great traction on has been with the cooperative purchasing agreements. Determine if you have to go out to RFP. If not, you should start looking for ways to purchase directly off contracts. Avoid the timing, in some cases the cost and headache of having to do the RFP. and look for either local, statewide awards and or national awards that are out there today with OEMs that have electric vehicles on contract. So we're really excited. We were just recently awarded the North Carolina Sheriff's contract, so we're on that. We have all of our trucks on that. But we're also going after several other states. As you can see, we've already secured Virginia, the California state contract. There are 4 other states we're working on today. And for any of you that have purchased off the nationwide Sourcewell or NJPA, we were just awarded that 3 weeks ago for all of our trucks as well. So again, this is just another avenue and path where you perhaps may not have to do an RFP today, since there's not a lot of OEMs out there that are building these trucks in the medium and heavy duty space. You might be able to do a single source, or you might be able to just go straight off contract, but this is something else that we thought we would share. Okay, so this is a really important slide. When you're considering electric, you really have to engage your utility early in your discussion. When I say early, about the same time you start engaging the OEM is when we've learned that you really should start engaging your local utility. I'll give you a quick story. Early on in our school bus years, in the beginning, we had a deployment where that did not happen. We built the truck, we delivered the truck, infrastructure was not in place, vehicles sat on the ground for close to 4 months, and nobody was happy. That can be avoided, but you have to start early to figure out what the installation lead times will be. To give you an example, in North Carolina, it may be a 90-day lead time, but in California, we've seen as high as 16 months. Figure that out early and get engaged to determine what your project's going to look like. Work with OEMs to make sure, again, going back to not only the right truck, but the right pack offering, and understand the amount of time you have overnight to charge. In some cases, this may change your pack offering, but it most definitely could change the type of infrastructure that you choose to go with. Third, conduct a site visit. Invite your local utility out. Look to see what power do you have at your facility today, and what do you want to do when it comes to charging for your rollout. And more importantly, in that rollout, are you trying to charge one pilot truck, or are you thinking about doing an expansion to 10, 12, 15 trucks, however many you have? Because what you don't want to do is throw good money on top of bad money, meaning invest early in 2 trucks to charge, but then realize you just have to start all over because you wanted to do 10. Things you have to take into account. And last, get a quotation on both level 2 and level 3. Lion offers both. Some OEMs today are just offering DC fast charging. Get quotations early so that when you're taking things to council or for budget consideration, not only do you have the truck cost in mind, but you have the infrastructure cost in mind. Our solution, quickly, is a team called Lion Energy. We have put together a team, and we're actually growing the team, where we have folks that are going to be dedicated to help with this process. We don't expect you to be experts. I can't say that every OEM is going to do this, but this is our solution to help break down this barrier and ease the adoption for end users into this space. The last is training, and I hit on that a little bit before, but you definitely want to make sure that you are partnering with OEMs that are going to put an emphasis on training. There is less training required when it comes to electric vehicles, simply because we don't have moving parts, we don't have oil, we don't have a transmission. There's a lot less going on, but at the end of the day, you still need to learn, how do we drive these vehicles, how does it vary from a diesel, and from a technician standpoint, you need to make sure that they understand what they should be touching, what they should not be working on. It really comes down, to be honest, mostly you're going to be changing fluids, and everything else on our trucks that we're delivering are all tier 1 suppliers that the technicians are already familiar with. Therefore, it's going to be similar PM to what they're working on today. So again, imperative that you get training with both technicians and drivers. Make sure that the parts are stocked locally or nearby to reduce downtime. That goes back to what I mentioned on the Lion Experience Centers. We're putting these experience centers out there to make sure that parts can get to you quickly, but also the vast majority of parts that we're using on our trucks today, you could go to your local dealer or the local truck store and get. We're not really building a rocket ship where you're not going to be able to find these parts, you're going to require Lion to ship the parts to you. So last but not least on this, make sure you guys are using your telematics. Most of you will already have this on there. We have created something called Lion Beat, which is going to be the first EV-oriented telematics solution, meaning we'll have capability to be able to monitor kilowatts per hour, charging, is your truck on charge, letting fleet managers know what the state of charge is even when it's out on route. So all great things, but all things you have to take into consideration. So at the end of the day, we've learned a lot over the last 4.5 years, and all of these things have to do with the EV world, which we're now bringing to truck. I hope you've learned something today, but at the end of the day, please reach out, make the bright move, contact Lion. We'd love to hear from you and how we can help you. And thanks to everyone for having us join today. At this point, I'm going to be turning it over to Chris, and Chris has a great presentation from the City of Charlotte. Take it away, Chris.
Thanks, Mark. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Davis, and today I'll be sharing with you some of Charlotte's electric vehicle journey. To start out, I'd like to talk about why electric vehicles. The City of Charlotte cares about people and the environment we live in, whether it be our health, safety, or economy. The City of Charlotte cares about the environment we live in, and that's one of our core values. So safeguarding the environment is important to us, and that shapes our policies and goals, and that's why we're striving to source 100% of our energy for buildings and fleets from zero carbon sources by 2030, and that's why zero emission electric vehicles are important to the City of Charlotte. Back in 2010, as a result of aligning our values with our policies, a new fleet policy was crafted and adopted, which guides us to use effective, efficient, and environmentally sustainable vehicles. And then in 2011, our 2010 fleet policy being in place, we applied and were awarded some funding that helped us purchase our first 7 EVs and put in some level 2 charging infrastructure, with the big idea there being to help Charlotte envision a cleaner and more sustainable future. As time marched on, city leadership, past and present, helped us propel our EV goals forward. And then if we fast forward to June 25th of 2018, City Council passed our Sustainable and Resilient Charlotte Resolution, targeting deep reductions in carbon emissions, believing low carbon cities improve environmental sustainability, social capital, economic mobility, and through clean energy industries and workforce development. Later in 2018, we won a Bloomberg grant for $2.5 million that paid for 2 full-time advisors and provided support from the Bloomberg Philanthropic. That brought great expertise and knowledge to help Charlotte gain traction with development of our Sustainable Energy Action Plan and our policies. And also in 2018, City Council passed our Strategic Energy Action Plan, or CEAP, and a contract for automotive vehicle locators, or AVL for short. The AVLs provide data for fleet tracking and management. As a result of City Council passing the CEAP and the AVL contract, new city policies were developed, Sustainable and Resilient Fleet Policy and an AVL policy, which move us forward with guidance and oversight. Policies are a must to shape emissions reductions and guide EV purchasing and utilization. So with our AVL policy, it calls for us to operate our fleet so that we are responsible, safe, efficient, effective, productive, sustainable, resilient, and data-driven. With data collection from AVLs, it informs our decision-making, provides insight for EV purchases and right-sizing, provides data for business cases for electric vehicle anti-idling technology, and it helps ensure drivers are on path, reducing fossil fuel use. I'm sorry, just a moment. So With our sustainable and resilient fleet policy, our goal is to source our energy from zero carbon sources by 2030, shifting energy demand and right-sizing our fleet in quantity and in size. This policy requires a shift from fossil fuels to low or zero emission vehicles, guiding us to purchase the lowest emission vehicle available for a job. With zero emission EVs being preferred and diesel being the least preferred, the CAP and our fleet policies provide a framework and broad benchmarking for us to move forward with this progress. And electric vehicles will help us meet those goals in the future. Oversight and equitable decision making is also important. Charlotte has a fleet management advisory team we call FMAT. It's made up of representatives from each department, including representatives from budget, finance, procurement, risk management, and our Office of Sustainability. FMAT members work together to draft and improve policies and provide oversight for fleet-related policies and issues. We also have an AVL governance committee who provide oversight and review our policies and AVL data management. AVL data, total cost of ownership, and policy drive our purchasing decisions. We purchase mostly from cooperatives like the NC Sheriff's Association and National Auto Fleet Group. However, trying to purchase EVs that meet our business needs is currently a major challenge. But a decade after we started, we're making progress with leadership, vision, proper policy, and lots of effort from lots of great people. We're well on our way to a more sustainable and resilient future, a future where we believe vehicles will be electric and energy will be renewable. With leadership and hard work, you can be on your way too. So this picture was taken a few weeks ago of my office. The solar shown belongs to Duke Energy. They rent our roof. 10 parking spaces have just been electrified with level 2 chargers. And the cars shown are all EVs, mostly from our shared motor pool. The Model 3 Tesla backed in the charge belongs to one of our employees, an early adopter of EVs that we allow to charge for free. So in broad buckets, if you want to succeed with EVs, in addition to leadership and buy-in, you need AVL. You need to know where your vehicles are going, what they're doing, and what EVs can meet your needs. You need to know your total cost of ownership. Total cost of ownership tells a story for behavioral change and for EVs. And you need a sustainable and resilient fleet policy to enforce number one and number two. These things will shift your organization behaviors and mindsets. Policies will tell your story for change. And lastly, knowing a transition is required, be realistic with what you can do. So Mark talked some about total cost of ownership. There's various models that can be simple to complex. We're running short on time, so I'll skip ahead. It's important to have strategy in place. So develop policies that establish strategies. Policies should set priorities. They should evaluate and align maximum infrastructure investment to support electrification. Doing an energy audit of your facilities will help to determine what electrical capacity you have available for charging locations and adequate electricity for chargers. That can help expedite installation of chargers and stretch your infrastructure dollars. Installing chargers during new construction is always a good idea to save money. Consider the type and number of EV infrastructures you need, the cost of charger installations, and remember chargers need annual maintenance. The use of AVL and total cost of ownership data, make data-driven decisions, and leverage your opportunities. That can be done through right sizing and moving vehicles around, as well as using savings that those things generate to help advance your electrification goals, and consider bridge opportunities like alternative fuels. Moving on, we've had our share of difficulties, but none really that different from any other challenges we face. There are learning curves along the way, whether you're developing policies and procedures or learning to work with code enforcement, contractors. Time and money are always factors. Just be creative, look for opportunities to move forward, and persevere and press on. Political trends will continue to drive the push toward EVs and a low-carbon future. Mayors from all over the world have worked to champion change. Here in North Carolina, Governor Cooper signed Executive Order 80 last year, which will advance the adoption of zero-emission vehicles. And recently, North Carolina joined 14 other states, along with the District of Columbia, committing to advance and accelerate the market for electric, medium, and heavy trucks, with the goal to be zero emissions by 2050. And that work starts now. So the EVs will come. Will you be ready? Our fleet supports the use of EVs where they make operational and economical sense. They manage our capital equipment replacements and work with us to develop policies that move us forward. We believe well-thought policies and guidelines are needed before purchase of EVs to ensure alignment of EVs along with organizational goals. EVs should be deployed where they will be used, not just displayed. Upfront capital cost is an important factor to consider. An EV can cost twice as much as an internal combustion vehicle, but total cost of ownership should be the key metric, and total cost of ownership is an important tool for replacement planning. AVL collection of geolocated vehicle data is important to know to help determine what EV can meet your needs, and the AVL data can be used to improve operational efficiencies, evaluate EV possibilities, and justify EV purchases. As the slide says, EVs require new skill sets for technicians. Electrical and technological expertise is currently lacking with some of our tech within our workforce. We found that technician training programs for EVs are extremely limited. An increased number of EVs in our fleet will require more trained technicians. So to help address EV technician training challenges, our fleet management folks have worked with CPCC to develop some EV technician training. Central Piedmont Community College is our local community college. Back in 2018, they started their Tesla Start program, a student automotive technician program aimed at to train students to work on EVs. We continue to have discussions with them, and our goal is to have some EV training put together and available through them by the end of this calendar year, even though COVID has delayed our efforts. So we'll see what the future holds. Just a little history. Our first-gen Leafs with their limited range resulted in range anxiety that caused our drivers to fear using them, which has been difficult to overcome. However, we press people to use EVs, and when they do, they like them, and range anxiety can be overcome. Our current EVs do have low utilization, impacted by misconceptions and established behaviors, but we're heavily encouraging use, and people really like them once they get to use them. So cost of ownership has been low, but we still have questioned the total cost of ownership for EVs, and we'll question that until we have our own data. We're working to continue to develop and move forward with total cost of ownership modeling. We've only encountered one major mechanical failure with the EV where we lost the drive motor. We'll see what the future holds. Our biggest maintenance challenge, honestly, is diesel trucks and their emission systems being a challenge. Light-duty cars can easily be replaced with EVs now as long as charging is available, and we're working diligently to install charging infrastructure. We've installed anything from a simple 220 outlet or plugged into 120 where needed in the past, but we're moving things forward. Another challenge has been premium models and the perception of premium brands, and just how to overcome that in the future. There's significant obstacles to overcome, but with data, misconceptions can be corrected. So we started a decade ago with commitment, followed by policy and tools like AVL, and now we're picking up speed to electrify our fleet. I can't wait to see what this decade holds. To date, the city has 17 EVs and plans to buy 20 or more this year. This fiscal year, the city has also funded $1 million for additional EV infrastructure. We have 50 plus chargers in place, and we'll be installing another 38 dual cord chargers, level 2 chargers. That'll give us 76 more places to charge EVs. So after a decade of work, we're well on our way toward electrification of our fleet. So that's where we've been. I'd like to challenge you to consider where you are and what will be your next steps to move forward. Sorry for the quick pace, but we're short on time. Again, I'm Chris Davis, and this concludes my presentation.
Great. Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone in the audience for bearing with us there. Yeah, went a little bit over time here, but really great information, and really appreciate each of our speakers jumping through here. So I do want to get to a couple of Q&A questions just in order to, again, encourage any audience members that are able to stay on the line for the next few minutes. If you would like to continue joining us, there will be a recording available. So if you're also in a bit of a time crunch, no worries there. We'll certainly be able to follow up with the recorded session. So with that, I'll actually kind of just throw it over here to with the first question to Chris. And I guess before we go on, I just mentioned that for anybody that will be staying on the line, please feel free to use the Q&A chat option there in the webinar module to submit any questions. And even if we can't get to them in the next few minutes, each of our speakers will be able to follow up with you all with any individual or specific questions. So let's take a look here. Chris, you mentioned that the city of Charlotte, has kind of paved the way with some progressive leadership. I'm just kind of curious what that process has been like since you guys have really been deploying EVs over the last couple of years. Have they stayed really engaged, and what's been the process like to kind of update them and to really iterate your policies and processes as you continue to learn new information?
Well, again, EVs is part of aligning with our core value of being a good steward of the environment. Our city council's unanimously committed to transitioning our fleet to EVs and zero emission sources to reduce negative environmental impacts. They've made our fleet transition a major priority. They've instructed staff to set and strive for ambitious goals, like being zero carbon by 2030. They've required us to do periodic reporting on our progress, holding staff accountable, and staying committed themselves. They've provided funding to help with the transition, like the $1 million this year for EV infrastructure, and they've pushed for fleet transition in our most visible area, public transit, by challenging our Charlotte area transit service, our CATS buses, to move toward electrification. So those would be some quick examples.
Great. Well, thanks, Chris. And kind of building off of Chris, something that you mentioned with kind of the telematics and the tracking applications, I'm going to throw a question over to Mark just to share maybe like what some of the current or future telematics options are for your various medium and heavy duty vehicles. Is that something that you guys have kind of integrated into the vehicles, and what are some of your visions for kind of meeting some of those fleet needs that telematics could address?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think any OEM is, especially with how new the space is for electric, is going to want to make sure that they understand how the vehicles are performing. We, in the past, with our school buses, had generic tracking mechanisms that most of us are used to, tracking data that we're all familiar with. But the EV is a different animal, and we all need to learn, both on the OE side as well as on the end user side. So we actually did a full transform over of our telematics system, moved out the old ones, moved in our new powered ones. And I mentioned briefly in my presentation, we have a division called Lion Beat, and that is going to be a group of folks helping to monitor and figure out what works best. Things that we're going to be focusing on are not just what you guys are already familiar today with fleet management, driver management, routing and dispatch, but things like energy management, remote diagnostics and maintenance. We're also going to be able to have things like ADAS, safety systems integrated, being able to track the status of the battery, being able to show fleet managers if vehicles are on charge, what status charge, if they're not on charge, why. So again, I think it's going to be a little bit different. You can still use what you're using today if you use Geotab or others, but our system is going to be uniquely focused and centered around the electric vehicle, which is something that is not yet out there today. So we see great things from this, because at the end of the day, when Chris mentioned and I mentioned total cost of ownership, we view telematics as a way that is going to help reduce that total cost of ownership, increase productivity. We will even have capability of having in-vehicle driver training through our telematics system to teach folks, drivers, how to use the vehicle better to get more efficient and better productivity out of it. So a lot of great things coming with telematics.
Perfect. Thanks for that rundown. Yeah, so I just want to make sure to kind of follow up on some questions kind of from the funding perspective as well. You know, Bill, you really emphasized the need to connect with the Clean Cities organizations, you know, or the Clean Cities of North Carolina, for any organizations that, you know, might be trying to pursue some of these funding options. Just a question, is that also an option for folks that might not fall into the 3 territories of the Clean Cities coalitions here in North Carolina? Would you guys be able to help additional organizations, or would you be able to share, you know, where they might be able to go for any additional assistance?
Yes. We absolutely are happy to talk with anyone in North Carolina or even outside the state and give them some guidance, turn them over to others that may assist them. So we're very happy to do that. In addition, NC State University's Clean Energy Technology Center promotes the use of alternative fuel and advanced technology vehicles as well, and they administer the CFAT grant program, and that's all statewide. So if you're in the Triad or down on the coast or outside one of the coalition service areas here in North Carolina, feel free to give Rick Sapienza or John Bonnets with that program a call, and they were listed on that contacts page that I provided. So we will take care of you here in North Carolina.
Great. Thanks, Bill. Well, as we're kind of winding down here, I want to grab kind of one of the questions that was submitted by some participants. Chris, it looks like this one will be good for you. This is coming from Ricky Isaacs. Are all of your EVs charged at your facility in one centralized location, or are any of them, you know, brought home with employees kind of as, take-home vehicles where they might be charged, or even charged in dispatched or decentralized locations?
Yeah, so initially we have charged all our EVs at our different work locations. Especially with COVID, we do have a lot more staff working from home and taking vehicles home. So we're working on some updates to our policy to address that, working with our risk management folks about concerns about how what would happen if there was an issue plugging in at home, as well as how to provide a financial stipend or something, perhaps for employees to cover their electricity costs of an EV going home. But I personally have taken EV home and simply ran an extension cord to an outlet on my front porch and charged 110 overnight at 4 or 5 miles per hour, and the ability to top off to take it out of town to a conference the next day in Durham from Charlotte without a problem. So it's just a moving target and something we're continuing to work on.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and I'd just again like to really emphasize for each of our speakers and all the attendees, thank you guys so much for joining this afternoon, and we will have a third webinar for this series to conclude things that should be announced over the next couple of weeks. So please stay on the lookout for that. Again, Mark really emphasized the need to kind of partner with and engage with your local utility, and so we're really going to be looking to emphasize that conversation and kind of have a couple of different perspectives from the utility for that next and last webinar. So thanks everyone for their patience as we kind of ran through these slides and really covered quite a bit of great information today. So thanks to each of our speakers and to everyone that joined. For any questions that we weren't able to get to this afternoon, we'll certainly touch base individually to make sure that we are able to engage in those questions and comments that you might have. And lastly, as we end our session, there will be a quick survey at the end, so please do us a big favor and fill out that survey with your thoughts and comments, and we'll certainly use that to continue to iterate and drive this process forward and continue delivering some great content. So with that, we'll go ahead and end our session this afternoon, and really looking forward to any follow-up conversations that may come. And again, special thanks to